ride.
Want a lift?
Hey! Okay, dude, let's see what that jalopy can do.
What's a jalopy?
First off the line.
Yeah, I'm sure they're feeling pretty silly right now.
Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to Megas Month. So, this episode, Thanksgiving Throwdown, is interesting in that this is actually my personal favorite episode, and it's the one that I kind of remember even years later. It's still one that I still fondly remember because I remember watching this one when when it aired on Thanksgiving. But yeah, I finally remember this one. This one was a lot of fun and very interesting. But yeah, this episode was just this episode is still very fun years later. And yeah, this is like the episode that made me want to do this series in the first place. But yeah, this episode is actually about an alien plant that Coop accidentally sets free, and it kind of trashes Thanksgiving, which is actually a very interesting concept. Actually, it's very fun, and there are a lot of really fun Easter eggs in this one as well. So first and foremost, it starts with Coop flying through space, and he's in a bit of a rush. He's going like 400 miles per hour, and he accidentally destroys the satellite at one point. And of course, Kiva then proceeds to tell him that he needs to slow down and asks him what the rush is. And of course, Coop points out that it's Thanksgiving and that's why he's rushing. He wants to get home as soon as possible for the Thanksgiving feast that his mom puts on gives every year. And of course, Kiva admits that she actually doesn't know what Thanksgiving is because as we find out, obviously she's from the future and she's from a far distant future where Thanksgiving isn't a thing because people are obviously constantly fighting for their lives, and the tradition of Thanksgiving has kind of died in the future, which is kind of sad. But of course, this is the key. But of course, Coop then points out that he just can't. That he just asks her if she's kidding, and then proceeds to start fantasizing about all the food that his mom is going to prepare on Thanksgiving, and proceeds to go into the whole thing and proceeds to start fantasizing about him actually going in and stuffing the turkey with all of his favorite things. When during his fantasy, Jamie mentions something about rings, and because Coop is spacing out, he doesn't know what Jamie is talking about first, and just thinks it's part of the fantasy until Jamie snaps him out of it and tells him that he's going to quite literally hit the rings of Saturn. As we find out, Coop has somehow made it all the way to Saturn and back without realizing it, and it actually winds up plowing a massive hole in the rings of Saturn. He winds up just punching a massive streak line through Saturn's rings, and even gets a couple of meteors stuck in couple of the rings of Saturn's moon stuck in his wake, and of course, both Kiva and Jamie shoot Coop death glares, but he merely remarks that it's probably fine and that it actually looks better that way, even though it's not. The rings of Saturn are a very big, breathtaking thing that you can actually observe from the safety of your own home. Just grab a telescope and try to find Saturn in your telescope, and you should be able to observe the rings of Saturn from here. You should be able to see them, but yeah, and obviously that's the big appeal of staring at Saturn, but Coop just kind of ruined it. But in any case, with after doing that by accident, Coop then proceeds to actually fly back home, unaware that several meteors are actually following him in his wake. And while a couple of them wind up hitting the moon, which is ironic considering Coop literally just fixed that a couple of episodes ago. But yeah, Coop flies home, and several of the meteors wind up burning up in the atmosphere. But one particularly small-ish one manages to survive all the way to Earth and winds up landing in a pond. And there's this really funny thing where you think it's going to hit this frog, but then it turns out to be too small to actually hurt the frog, let alone hit it. And it winds up falling in the lake, and the frog just kind of stares at it a little bit before going back to croaking. And at which point the main villain of the episode, Gynock, Gynock is a plant. First and foremost, Gynock is a plant. And apparently it was just trapped in the rings of Saturn with no way out, and because of how cold it was in space, it couldn't actually grow and actually move. And after freeing itself from the lake, the first thing it does is tries to go find a warm, sunny place to grow and infest in its own words, infest the universe. And with that, it then proceeds to stumble in the general direction of Jersey City because it's just this weird blob thing. It can't really move all that well. Of course, Coop, Jamie, and Keith are actually back at the house while Coop's mom is actually preparing Thanksgiving upstairs. And again, we don't actually see her because that's the whole point of her character. Heard, but never actually seen. And of course, Kiva does indeed suggest that they should probably help Coop's mom with Thanksgiving, she remarks that, but Coop just remarks that that's just the tradition every year. She cooks everything and then they eat everything, and also proceeds to teach Kiva what stuffing is, and Kiva doesn't fully understand why it's called stuffing, but she does admit it's delicious, and Coop even admits that he doesn't know, but in the actuality, the reason why it's called stuffing is because, it goes inside the turkey. It's literally used to stuff the turkey. That's why it's called stuffing. And in my house, we normally eat it separately, so we don't actually do the actual stuffing part. We just carve up the turkey and then and serve it separately, and then we just kind of eat stuffing on the side. That's how we eat it in my house. Coop then kind of just helps himself to a handful of stuffing, which is kind of gross and a little unsanitary, but then Kiva then begins to wonder what exactly it is that Thanksgiving is actually celebrating. Coop proceeds to offer up what Thanksgiving is about. It's about being thankful for all the things you love in your life. It's about all the things that you're thankful for. And he proceeds to just list off several of his favorite things, and how he's thankful for all of the things in his life that he's able to love and enjoy, which is actually a pretty accurate representation of how you actually celebrate Thanksgiving. Jamie, however, proceeds to go to the actual original origin of Thanksgiving, and he gets the details wrong, but basically how he explains it is that long ago, the first Thanksgiving was celebrated between Pilgrims and Indians, and that is what he gets right. Where he kind of embellishes a little bit, though, is that he thinks it's called Thanksgiving because people literally gave their thanks to people through presents, and of course, he then proceeds to explain how the Indians received presents from all of the Pilgrims when they first celebrated Thanksgiving, even though, in actuality, that's not actually what happens. But the actual story of Thanksgiving is a little more along the lines of the Pilgrims. They were struggling through a bit of a harsh winter, and they didn't really have any of the food they needed to really feed themselves. And the nearby Indians noticed they were struggling, and led by a name named Squanto. Squanto and his fellow Indians then proceed to offer up all the surplus they had in order to help the Pilgrims out through their harsh winter. And then the Pilgrims then proceed to repay the thanks by taking over all their land. But that's beside the point. The point is, it came from a kind gesture of help your fellow man. That's what it is. But Jamie, of course, misinterprets that entirely and claims that the Pilgrims just gave the Indians all their stuff, and now it's just an idea of just giving everybody gifts. But also asks Kiva to get him a gift, even though Kiva admits that she's not going to get him one, pointing out that he's probably not going to get her anything in return. And Jamie doesn't even deny this. He just in evidence of the fact that Jamie isn't a very likable person, he does point out that he's not really the kind of he's not really a giver person. He's more of a taker person, and he admits that. But in case, they just kind of go to eating, unaware that Guy Knock is currently inside Jersey City and is currently trying to find its way around to actually try and find a good place to actually lay down and gestate. And also in the process, it accidentally winds up getting stepped on by Goat, who is trying to pick up a girl and is trying to get her to go on a date with him to the parade. We do see the parade being set up here. I will get to the balloons in a minute because Coop and Jamie do kind of point out what some of them are, and they're all hilarious parodies of real world things. So I am definitely going to be talking about them in a little bit of detail later. But in case, of course, Goat isn't having much success with actually asking the woman out on a date, and I don't think she even has a name. She's just kind of there. But Diana quickly realizes that it needs to actually find a place to hide because it's vulnerable, and eventually realizes that there's a nearby payphone, which I'm not entirely sure if that's still a thing. I mean, I've talked about payphones before, but I'm not sure if they're still around anymore. I mean, obviously, I can actually demonstrate this. Obviously, this is our payphone now. Our phone fits in our pocket. It's no longer set up on the wall. It's no longer out in the open where you have to go and do a payphone. I'm assuming in older cities where there's still payphones, there probably are, and some people may know what they're talking about. But I don't think payphones are as widespread nowadays. I don't think the payphones are around anymore. But yeah, in any case, Skynet then proceeds to transform itself into a payphone, and until Goat eventually leaves. At which point, Skynet takes full advantage of the fact that there's really nobody around to and except for a couple of construction workers who aren't really paying attention. And Skynet eventually finds a nice sunny spot to lay down and plant its roots, and and begins to start gestating and growing to actually start start growing and creating more spores so that it can spread. But in the process, it winds up getting stepped on by Megas, and not even a conscious thing by Coop, or who's currently finishes his Thanksgiving meal with Kiva and Jamie, and are currently on their way to the parade. As we find out, Coop is actually going to take them to what he believes is the best part of the parade. And of course what we find out is that he's actually still hungry, even though he just ate an entire turkey by himself. He just kind of ate a whole bunch of food and is somehow still hungry. And of course, that's part of Coop's character. Obviously, it takes a lot to actually make him feel full. So yeah, of course, Coop just kind of mentions the fact that he's still hungry, but admits that they'll probably get some leftovers, and goes into all the other things that they can do with their surplus food once they're finished with the parade. Meanwhile, while Coop actually walks away, Gyna quickly realizes that Megas is a threat to it, and realizing that it's going to need something bigger to actually deal with Megas, then eventually notices all the parade floats that are going up, and immediately decides that the parade floats are actually the perfect form for it to take. And it's at this point where they actually start the parade, where Coop is actually settled into a place where he can actually see the parade from a pretty perfect place. Much to the chagrin of literally everybody around him, because obviously Coop got there early, and he's currently in a giant robot. So everybody else just kind of tries to pick a spot around him, and of course they can't really see anything. Obviously Megas is in the way, and everybody's having a hard time looking around the obvious giant robot. And one guy even complains from the roof of his apartment building, pointing out that, and when Jamie kind of mocks him, pointing out that he probably should have gotten there earlier, the man and his daughter then proceed to point out that they live there, they can't get any earlier than that. But in case Kiva then does in fact point out that it seems like going there in Megas was actually maybe a mistake, and points out if there's any real point of it. But Jamie does point out that being in Megas is actually the best seat in the house, for obvious reason. They can see everything very clearly from up in Megas, and Coop and Jamie then proceed to admire different things about the parade. Jamie admires the baton twirlers, because obviously Jamie is very much into women. That's very much an established part of his character. He flirts with a lot of women, but doesn't have much success. And he's actually spying on them with binoculars from up in Megas. While Coop actually takes an opportunity to actually admire the parade floats, which he admits that even though Kiva points out that they're made out of flowers, Coop points out that they're actually kind of cool. Not as cool as the kind of float he would design, and we actually do see a fantasy of him designing his own float out of metal parts and a bunch of other things. But he does admit that, yeah, they're actually pretty cool, even if they are a little bit girly and made out of flowers. But in case we then get to the main attraction of any good parade, which is the balloons. And of course, this is where I said I would put a pin in this. But what we find out is that a lot of the parade floats are parodies of real world things. For case in point, we've got Freakazoid here, who is a character from his own TV show, and we've got Deputy Duck, who I think is a reference to Daffy Duck. I'm not 100% on that, and also the Fabio brothers, who are obviously a parody of the Mario Brothers, and then we actually end on Augie the adorable Aardvark, who is a parody of Sonic the Hedgehog, and of course what we quickly find out is that Coop thinks Augie is a little bit lame. He doesn't particularly like Augie because apparently Augie doesn't have the same in the world of Megas. He doesn't have the same reputation as Sonic, where Sonic is cool and a little bit badass, but his games are just kind of well, I like Sonic games, but admittedly, the large majority of people have pointed out that the writing hasn't been good for a while, and they do kind of have a point. I do like the writing in some of the in a lot of Sonic games, but the new ones are kind of interesting, but because obviously they've gotten a little bit oversaturated with all the characters, and that's a big problem. But you know, they're still fun. I still enjoy them. I like the storylines that are in Sonic. I do like playing a Sonic game every once in a while. They're fun. They are very fun. But in any case, it's at this point where Coop starts honking at Augie to get out of the way and let the rest of the real parade come through. At which point the balloon is revealed to have actually been possessed by Gynoc, and it then proceeds to roar at him. And of course Coop doesn't fully understand what's going on, and he and Jamie actually just kind of laugh it off, because obviously Augie the adorable aardvark is threatening them, and they take Augie very seriously. And Coop even asks if they're on some sort of hidden reality camera TV show, and he very much feels like he's being pranked. But at which point Jamie remarks that maybe he'll use his adorable love to actually fight back against him, and the two just kind of joke about it a lot. But eventually, Augie the adorable aardvark does start mutating into a more muscular and more combat-ready form, and then proceeds to actually punch Megas, which causes it to go flying a little bit. And it's to this point where Coop finally realizes he has to start taking things seriously, and of course Gynoc through the balloon then proceeds to remark that it sees Megas, which exclusively refers to as a metal giant, as the main threat to Gynoc, and that in order for it to gestate and grow, it needs to destroy Megas. And of course Coop wonders what exactly is going on with the balloon, but Kiva then points out that it doesn't feel that after scanning it isn't a balloon at all. She quickly finds out that it's actually some sort of plant. And of course, Coop quickly realizes that regardless of what it is, he's going to need to actually fight back. He's actually going to need to fight back against it because it's currently ruining the parade. And sure enough, proceeds to try and fight Gynoc as Augie. But what we quickly find out is that because it's a balloon, it has little to no effect on literally anything. So because obviously it's a very flexible form for Gynoc to actually take and can't actually be hurt. So Coop's weapons just kind of either bounce off of it or otherwise just go straight through it. So yeah, and of course because Gynoc can actually repair itself, it winds up having no effect on it, and Coop accidentally winds up destroying several of the other balloons in the process, which does wind up becoming a problem. But And of course, during the fight, it actually winds up appearing on the camera, filming the people hosting it, which winds up catching their attention because they can see Megas and Augie fighting in the cameras, and even the male announcer just turns around and it's just like, well, it seems this parade is kind of going off to a bit of an interesting start, and it's just a really funny side gag, but of course. Coop, after blowing up all of the balloons, then becomes increasingly frustrated and actually winds up smacking the dashboard, which causes Coop to accidentally activate Megas' freeze ray, which of course is the one thing that can actually defeat Gynoc. As we find out, Gynoc winds up being frozen and is unable to move, and then Coop winds up punching it into a million tiny pieces, which of course causes Gynoc goo to just go everywhere, and of course, Coop immediately, and some of it actually winds up on Megas' windshield, so Coop has to clean it off. But of course, Coop points out that seems to have taken care of that. But and of course, he and Jamie remark that they're going to need to remember that weapon for the future. But of course, Kiva points out the very obvious problem that they need to figure out what the balloon is, and it is even sarcastic about the fact that about it because obviously Coop isn't really concerned about it, and Kiva just kind of points out, well, yeah, we maybe. Well, I mean, yeah, of course, because a plant-possessed balloon that attacks people out of nowhere, that doesn't need to be investigated at all. And Coop doesn't get her sarcasm, so he agrees with her. So and then proceeds to go back to go and try to watch the balloon. But of course, and even remarking that since Gynok is frozen, there's not really much of anything he can do. Unaware that Gynok's pieces have actually fallen into the sewer, and because of that, they actually were able to defrost, and Gynok was able to grow a little bit more because the sewer has a lot of heat and steam in it. So yeah, as Coop is actually walking away to go back and finish the rest of the parade, which isn't much because Coop accidentally destroyed all the balloons. Several giant hands actually wind up ripping through the floor and wind up grabbing Coop, and of course Jamie quickly points out that this seems like it's going to get worse before it gets better. And sure enough, what we see is that not only has Gynok actually burst out of the ground, now having reformed as Augie the adorable aardvark, but he also has recruited the Fabio brothers, who he has now taken the form of. He basically just takes form of all the various parade floats that got destroyed because Gynok was able to reassemble all of the various scraps that were just lying around and were able to take their form. This of course causes Coop to realize that Gynok is trying to level the playing field, and eventually frees himself from the grasps of the other balloons that are trying to grab him, and tries to go in to actually try and punch Augie the aardvark, but once again, and Kiva even begins to explain this, one force isn't gonna work. So of course, Coop just winds up going flying into the nearby park, and at which point Gynok surrounds him with all of its new various balloon forms, and proceeds to point out that now it has the power to actually defeat Megas, and points out that once it does, it'll be able to gestate and grow. And of course, Coop points out that it's not going to let him do that. So it immediately starts going in to try and fight several of the balloons. And at one point, the Fabio brothers do a tag team where it tries to rip Megas in half, but Megas just kind of knocks him out. But of course, Coop quickly realizes that his conventional weapons aren't going to work, and flips open a secondary weapon inside of Megas's Megas's gear shifter. As we find out, Megas apparently just has a buzzsaw that Coop apparently installed at some point, and he immediately goes in to attack Augie the adorable aardvark with it, pointing out that basically he's just like, I'm gonna have, what do you like, white meat or dark meat? I'm gonna carve this turkey. Basically just makes a Thanksgiving joke, but while it does wind up resulting in a very cool visual, all it really does is wind up shorting out the mower on the buzzsaw, and Coop winds up getting knocked down again. And eventually it gets to the point where all of the parade floats are able to actually surround Megas and actually manage to shut down most of its main systems, and eventually Megas is unable to fight back. And Gynok, now satisfied that it's taken Megas out of the equation, then proceeds to actually reabsorb all of its different parade float forms back into itself, and then proceeds to start growing and gestating. And of course, Coop quickly realizes there's a very obvious problem with that, and that they need to now figure out how to actually defeat Gynok. And Jamie remarks that this seems to be how it's all going to end, and didn't think they would be going out to a giant Jiffy Pop popcorn popper. But this causes Coop to actually have an idea, and actually proceeds to go into his trash talk, where he remarks that where of course he remarks all the things Gynok did about how he wrecked the parade. He wrecked the parade, made him destroy a bunch of parade floats and a whole bunch of other things, and then proceeds to tell Gynok that if he wants heat, he will give him heat. And then quite literally gives him heat. He turns on the heater in Megas, which and winds up blasting it out of the air conditioner on Megas's wrist, which winds up firing a blast of concentrated heat straight at Gynok. And initially, this winds up being a problem because obviously Gynok is very happy about the fact that he's now getting sustained heat and is now able to grow a lot faster. And of course, Jamie and Kiva very much look at Coop like he's crazy. Like, are you nuts? You're making it grow faster. Why are you doing this? But Coop looks at it, just continues onward with a very steely gaze, and eventually what we do find out is that Coop actually was onto something. He actually did something smart. So because as we find out, Gynok is a plant, which means it uses heat to grow. But what Coop actually figures out is that it can actually overheat. And sure enough, And sure enough, Gynoc, despite very claiming of the fact that it will now finally be able to gestate and grow, eventually starts feeling sick and explodes into a puddle of black sludge that just goes everywhere. And Kiva is Kiva's actually a little surprised at Coop, wondering how he figured that out. And Coop just kind of pointed out that he wanted heat, so he gave him some, and does point out that he went on the idea that you can overheat a popcorn popper. So basically what he did was he just turned Gynoc into burnt popcorn, and of course this just caused Gynoc's sludge to melt, overheat, and go everywhere. And of course, Coop does point out that it smells kind of bad and decides that they should get out of there and get ready to go back to the house for leftovers. And Jamie asks Kiva if she knows what Thanksgiving is about now. And of course, she remarks the very obvious thing that she's learned, which is that it's about eating good food and trashing alien monsters. Which Coop points out is as good a conclusion to make as any, and proceeds to go back to the house. With Kiva pointing out that it's obvious that they can't really do much more damage around here. And of course, Coop does wind up slipping and falling into a building, which causes it to break. But for the most part, the damage is done. There's not much anything else can do. Eventually, a crew will come along and clean up all the Gynoc gunk that's all over the place. And of course, as we find out in the ending credits, because Coop's battle with apparently what we find out is that Coop's battle with all the various balloons made the news. And because of that, this parade has actually been hailed as the best one ever, and it wound up making the news because of that. So Megas wound up making the news because of this, and I find that kind of interesting and fun. But of course, as I said, this episode is one of my favorites, and it's one that I still fondly remember to this day. But this episode, of course, is just about all the various references and cameos that they can slip in. And of course, I do highly recommend watching the episode, as I do with all of these. That's to actually go and see if you can pick out a couple of the ones that you know, because there are a lot of them, and I do think that this review probably isn't going to do them much justice. But go check them all out. And they're fun. The cameos are fun. Gynoc is actually a pretty fun villain, and this is literally just a giant plant that is trying to grow and do plant things. That's literally all it's trying to do. It's a plant from outer space that was trapped in Saturn's rings. It's literally just trying to do plant things. And I do kind of find that interesting in that in the process of trying to do plant things, it winds up becoming a pretty formidable threat to Megas. But this episode is just fun, and it does kind of sort of teach the whole moral about what Thanksgiving is about how it's about being thankful for the things that you're given, and just kind of learning the traditions of Thanksgiving. And I do like that. It's just a really fun Thanksgiving episode. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. If you want to help support the show, that's actually the best way to do that. It's only a couple bucks a month. That are my way of saying thanks. And it just has a bunch of cool perks that you should just check out. So just go check that out. Link is down in the description. And finally, be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen as well. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is actually the video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. And currently, I have it set to play Courage Month. So if you absolutely want to go check out the original one of these that I did, by all means, again, link is on the end screen. Go check that one out. I put a lot of work into that one. I would love to see your guys' reaction to it. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!